Hi everyone, I'm Anna Dobby and I'm a reporter for M&M Global, and thanks for coming along this evening to discuss whether targeted advertising is the future of TV. As technology evolves, the field of advertising is changing in many ways, as we know. Targeted advertising in television has brought with it questions about the role of advertisers across video on demand, data and linear TV services. And it offers consumers with tailored and personal ads, which arguably improves the TV viewing experience by making it more relevant, which should benefit everyone in the TV industry, right? So tonight we're going to talk about how TV advertising has changed, whether targeted advertising is as beneficial to both consumers and the industry, and discuss who really owns the TV ad break. So here we've got this very esteemed panel, which I'll start off with Rich Astley, who's the Chief Product Officer of Addressable TV at Group M. Everyone give him a clap, yeah. And then we've got Simon Cook, who is the Product and Business Development Director at YouView. Chris Ladd, who is the Senior Manager of Advertising, Media and Campaign Management at Nationwide. We've got Jonathan Lewis, who is the Head of Digital and Partnership Innovation at Channel 4. And finally, but last but not least, obviously, Jamie West, the Deputy Managing Director of Sky Media UK and Group Director of Advanced Advertising at Sky. So, let's just start by talking about who are currently the big players in TV content and what's been changing in the TV and advertising industry. Start with you, yeah?
Sure. In content specifically, I think we can classify it into the old world and the new world, I think. So we've obviously got the traditional broadcasters who are producing, brilliant content and have been for a long, long time. And then, of course, you've got a lot of the new digital players in the ecosystem, the likes of the Netflix and the Amazons, who are also investing considerably into global content that they're distributing into local markets. And, of course, the blurring of lines in terms of the premium nature of that content, I think, is getting ever more complicated.
I can't disagree with Rich. I mean, there's a growing divergence, I think, and you've got the strength of Netflix. You see Amazon this week and announcing the channels proposition. I think the other dynamic isn't just that there are new content entrants that have grown strong quite quickly, like Netflix and Amazon and now TV. It's the fact that the market for TV viewing is sort of being fragmented across devices and across live and catch-up TV and SVOD and transactional VOD. So I think people are watching a lot of TV on a lot of devices in a lot of different ways, paying for it in different ways, which makes, in the context of this conversation about advertising, makes it very hard to track what people are doing and to compare what people are doing.
Continue round.
So we're a UK advertiser. If you look at the BARB figures, I think ITV, Channel 4, Channel 5, Sky, they're still the biggest providers of content. I did read this morning that Amazon Prime is in 50% of households in the US, which sounds like that could be a threat at some point to the UK, but I think for most British advertisers, we're still looking at those providers who provide huge audiences, and those talk about moments that you all do in the office and with your friends and family. That's the magic of television, and those brands are still producing the best content.
Jonathan, what's Channel 4's perspective?
Yeah, I think, fundamentally, I think consumer behaviour is changing, but I think also specifically for a younger audience. We carried out some research recently, particularly around sort of SVOD services. I think I was just showing Jamie the numbers. I think the stats on sort of the main SVOD providers, so Netflix, Amazon, Now TV, I think collectively, in terms of number of subscribers, are about the same size as Sky now, which is quite surprising. I think also for younger audiences, Netflix now has a greater reach on a weekly basis of 16 to 24s, around about 45% versus BBC iPlayer. So there is a fundamental, significant shift going on in user behaviour. I suppose our job as broadcasters and also platform operators is to meet that challenge and compete in this world. Obviously, we have an advertising proposition as opposed to a subscription-based model from Channel 4's perspective. But yeah, we need to take it head on. We need to fight the fight. We need to invest in content, both on linear and digital, and grow our services accordingly.
So from a Sky perspective, just and listening to what the guy said, the only thing I'd really add is that beyond changing behaviours, what we need to accept is that the power and the quality of the content will hold through. It's all about choice, whether that be choice on platform or access or device. And where you will see the most change is where you give customers choice. So where you can make content available to customers how they want, where they want, on whatever device they want, that is what is going to win out over time. The note of caution, or maybe not caution, but observation that I'd make is that when you read trade press or online articles about TV today, they're mostly biased towards the US market. It's such a fundamentally different market. The advertising minutage, averages about 20 minutes versus the UK's 9. The subscription rates for MVPDs in the US is thousands of dollars and significantly less in the UK. You've got more choice in the UK, better content, better ad breaks, all of those sort of things. So when people talk about the death of TV on all the trade titles and online sites, it's kind of biased to one market where you have a kind of slightly broken market.
The big threat to UK content is Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google. I mean, the amount of money and the cash that those guys are sitting on, at any point they could come in and completely disrupt the UK market. I guess they could buy Sky, they could buy ITV in the blink of an eye with small change, and that then potentially fundamentally changes who owns content and what content is produced.
Jamie, can you tell us a little bit more about the success of Sky AdSmart, as that's the longest standing ad platform?
Yeah, so AdSmart has been in market now for 3.5 years. I guess we've been on this sort of real growth trajectory over the last few years. It was very much in that first 6 to 12 months. It was very much a test and learn phase. Customers, advertisers trialing and agencies trialing and trying to find what is the best use of targeting and addressability within the TV market. When we've just surpassed the 7,000th campaign, 5 billionth impression, just over 1,200 advertisers active on the platform over the last couple of years. So you get a sense of momentum and scale. And for us, has always been about making TV more relevant to more brands, making TV more flexible and giving it more optionality. So instead of being the domain of the big, the broad, the rich brands, it's now giving us the opportunity to talk to, highly targeted in terms of local or highly targeted in terms of audience, whether it be McLaren cars or high-end finance. So the breadth of advertisers on the platform is, and on TV has never been greater. And with 2/3 of the advertisers being either new to TV or new to Sky, we're really growing. And that stat, to be fair, is holding true and in fact growing year on year on year. So it's delivering on that aim. And so we're just looking to grow the proposition, build out the opportunity across channels and platforms and partnerships over time.
Okay, with regards to the growth of targeted advertising and its pitfalls, how do you get the momentum for targeted advertising when there are so many different platforms, technologies and approaches? As you can see by the range of people we've got here. Simon, do you want to start us with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably the least advertising focused of the people on the panel here. I mean, we're a platform that provides TV platform for TalkTalk and BT, and we've got a project that's looking at building a addressable linear dynamic ad insertion, we call it, functionality. We haven't greenlit that yet. So I'm coming to this with sort of fresh eyes, and I spend quite a bit of time with Channel 4 and ITV, but I've also talked to Jamie about the challenges they've got, and it's not easy. I mean, I think we're coming from a world where Barb is a currency that everyone knows for linear advertising, and yet in the VOD world, everyone's kind of got their own approach, and some people do it very well and are more sophisticated than others. And so you've got advertisers that I think can see the benefits of addressable advertising, and at the moment they've got Sky, and they've built a very good product that they can go and use, and there's quite sophisticated targeting. But I can see a world where, UView offer a capability and Virgin are working on a capability. And people like Jonathan at Channel 4 want to be able to target across all Channel 4 content across every platform, and people like Jamie have got attributes and targets that they can sell you for that platform. And advertisers like Chris just want to go to one place and say, I want to buy targeting, across all of these platforms. And there isn't going to be a currency that comes up overnight that deals with this. So I think, the things you do need to do is get some sort of standardization of approach around measurement and how you measure attribution and return on investment, and then when we talk about cross-platform targeting, what's the different measurement of engagement of watching TV on an iPad or watching it on a Sky or a UView box. So I don't think there's any technical challenges to doing it. I think there's complexity, and you've got to make it simple for the advertisers.
I think it's important to it's a bit confusing, I think, for a lot of people what we talk about. Talk about addressable TV, we talk about targeting. It's very important to make the distinction between linear television and targeting that's available and currently enabled on linear TV, and also video on demand advertising, which can be delivered by various different platforms and devices, but ultimately is catch-up IP delivered. And the targeting that is available currently from a linear perspective is really what Jamie talks about with the AdSmart proposition, which is a Sky-only proposition, a Sky-owned and operated channels proposition at the moment, which is targeting based on household data, which Jamie, you can talk about at length. But then there's the detail of advertising targeting that can happen on video on demand platforms, which is kind of what advertisers are interested in, because that's, I suppose, the relative scaled opportunity that exists at the moment, where agencies and advertisers are buying programmatically segmented audiences across a number of different video publishers across a network, basically, which is where Rich in his previous life operated with Videology. So I think it's really important to make that differentiation, because addressable TV is, as we talk about in this day and age, is relatively nascent, and there is only one broadcaster kind of really operating in that space at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that although I agree, I think probably the challenges are more political and commercial rather than they are technical. There are still some fundamental kind of building blocks that I think are quite challenging. So, just for example, platforms like, for example, a set-top box isn't necessarily always IP connected, right? So, you're not always going to get the ability to dynamically insert an ad. Sometimes it's actually downloaded to the box, and you get the impression event, after the delivery. So, that's just fundamentally different to, say, for example, digital, where you're getting a real-time advertising call right there and then that you can make a decision on. And stuff like that is just tough. So you're taking fundamentally different delivery platforms and stitching them together into something that hopefully is going to be scalable enough and interesting enough for an advertiser like Chris to say, okay, I can deliver mass reach to targeted audiences here across multiple platforms and through multiple broadcasters. A big challenge, right?
At an effective cost.
Yeah.
Because at every addressable ad that we might want to produce, there's a whole lot of creative production costs, which might excite the people who work around here, because that might be more revenue for them, but it starts to become impractical to be able to afford that.
Well, I was going to ask about, a scalability of targeted advertising. Is it actually a good thing for advertisers? And when's the right time to use it?
I think with the good things, as Jamie said, Sky and others have brought a lot of new advertisers to television. It was a bit of a closed shop. National advertisers, London creative agency, London media buying agency, millions of pounds, and 10 years ago, that's how you did TV advertising. And now there are a lot of new brands. There's the interesting potential possibility of matching our customer data with a Sky or a Channel 4's insight into their customer base, and then start serving relevant messages to customers who don't have a mortgage or might be buying a home for the first time. But that capability and intelligence is exciting. And then for those regional brands, particularly high value products, allows them to use television in their region, which traditionally was very hard to do. They're all the good things, but I think there are some risks to it. I think the more advertisers come to the market, this sounds like advertising snobbery, and it shouldn't be. I live in Swindon. I'm not London-centric. But as you get more new brands onto television, the potential is that those advertising breaks become less engaging, the quality is lower. I'd quite argue that TV advertising is perhaps not as creatively interesting as it was 15, 20 years ago already. But therefore, the effectiveness of those breaks, and going to that US market, ad breaks in the US are long and pretty uninspiring. And therefore, the effectiveness of television starts to diminish.
So that's quite an interesting thing, because it was a concern, having a broader range of advertisers, whether it be in locality or SMEs, whether that would really change the dynamic of the ad break. And what surprised Sky more than anything else is that in breaks where there was a targeted ad, so the whole break, so the whole 3.5 minutes, so not the 10-minute break you get on in the US, or 5, but whatever. In the whole of the 3.5 minutes of a break, channel switching, where there was one addressable ad, reduced by 33%, and to that particular spot that is targeted, it reduced by 48%. Now, in my simple mind, that means more relevant ads mean more engaged audiences. And when you think about the broadening that funnel of advertisers, the brands that we've had on include Net-a-Porter, Burberry, McLaren, Porsche, at one end of the spectrum, down to your local car dealership, your local financial advisor, or whatever it may be. But that stat is consistent across the piece, on average, whether you look at all of them. So, whilst it was a fear, it's been disproven since we've been in market. So, you should rest assured.
Also, I think, sorry to jump in, I think to talk about scalability, it depends on what platform you're relating to. So if I refer back to our digital all-4 platform, video on demand, which represents about 10% of our total Channel 4 revenues, we're delivering, I would say, around about 75% of the revenue we take on all 4 is now targeted. So it's audience-driven through the capability that we have through the registered user base that exists. There's around about 15 million, 16 million people that sign up, give us their email address, their gender, their age, various details that we can then target against and deliver effective advertising to based on audiences and also interests. But picking up on what Jamie was saying, when we see it adds value and it drives real ROI for brands. So we can target using people's names, which you've done, to great effect with likes of Burberry and Coke. We just released the recent audio campaign for the new Alien film with Fox, which you may have seen on the news a couple of weeks ago, which is the first personalised audio campaign that exists in videos. So all of this stuff does very much lend itself to delivering more effective advertising, but I am talking about a platform relatively which is still only 3 to 5% of Channel 4's total viewing, which needs to be put into context.
I think as automation goes and the amount of data that's used to intelligently target, that sounds exciting. The risk is, and it may just be me, but most of the advertising I get online is poorly targeted. I've already bought the product. It's targeted towards my wife because we have a shared IP and a shared iPad. And the risk is that as so-called big data has a bigger influence on advertising, you're actually serving the wrong ads to the wrong people. Certainly that's a massive problem in the online world. I think at the moment it is a nascent opportunity. The data is controlled by really these two guys, and therefore it's working. The risk is it becomes a larger
I think that's the challenge of where we've come from. This whole world of targeting and data has evolved in dare I say it, a display-based industry. We're moving into an audiovisual premium quality TV-centric world where some of the old display rules probably need to be dispensed with, and we need more rigour and accuracy around the targeting and the ability to deliver more effective messaging to users and viewers.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. First of all, you're talking about an emotive media of sight, sound, and motion advertising, which is fundamentally different, and the quality standards for that, I think, are always naturally going to have to be higher. So to your point around what kind of advertising is acceptable within a break, we've got pretty stringent standards here in the UK around what is deemed to be acceptable, clear cast compliance and these sort of things, and also ad approval, which is it's kind of down to the broadcasters to decide what is and is not appropriate to deliver on their platform. So there's certainly a way to set the standards there, I think, in terms of what's acceptable. In terms of the targeting side of things, I think that the fundamental difference to what we see in digital has always been built to be very much a one-to-one medium, which is about the device on which you are consuming media. And of course, the television is a shared device in the household more often than not, right? And so I think the two things that play into that is, first of all, the way you target is going to be different, because if you're going to target a household, you're probably not, the one exception being where probably Channel 4 have individual data, but typically you're going to be looking at more attributes at a household level. Secondly is, what's happening in the sort of privacy regime coming up with GDPR and everything. Can't have a panel without talking about GDPR, is going to make it more challenging, I think, to have targeted advertising products at an individual basis. And that's going to, I think, set probably some more stringent standards around what we can and can't do, and certainly something that our advertisers are asking us a lot about at the moment.
Okay, talked a little bit there about some other topics I'd like to come back to as well. But Simon, you mentioned that you might need a standardised approach to measurement. Is that something that you guys also agree on, or?
Yeah, look, I think it makes sense for platforms and operators to collaborate so that we make it easy for brands and agencies to transact. And the last thing you want to do is create friction in the purchase chain by having 4 or 5 different currencies or whatever it may be. And so, at Sky, we regularly talk to our partners, and competitors, whether it be at YouView, at Virgin, whoever it may be, about some of the learnings, because the feedback that I get from brands and agencies is, how can you make this bigger across more platforms? How can you ensure that it's easier for me to buy across more platforms? So I think it absolutely makes sense. That's not to say that we shouldn't differentiate our products and capabilities and approach the market, but common standards is the right thing, especially in a world where we are, and a couple of the guys have talked about it, this premium content environment. We already have world-class gold standard measurement with Barb. We already have these currencies where we charge for only viewable impressions, and we charge not just for a single second view, but when you view the whole ad. So I think it's important for us to continue to differentiate TV as the premium environment.
Yeah, and I think we can come into a natural point in time where, as broadcasters particularly, we've all sort of travelled in our various different trajectories and moved forward and innovated and driven new products, particularly in the digital space. And I'm, this is personal belief as opposed to maybe a corporate belief. I'm firmly of the view that, there will come a point where, picking up on what Jamie was saying, a point of aggregation around the, consistent data sets, around the ability to target audiences that are familiar from a, Channel 4 or Sky or IT or whoever it might be perspective, because at the moment, if you're an advertiser, you can buy targeted audiences on all 4, but then when you're on the ITV hub, you've got to be buying a different type of audience that might be nuanced in a certain way. So how possibly can you frequency cap or recognise that your communication is effective as you jump onto each of these different publisher platforms? So consistency, I think, will come, but it's very, very hard. Barb Dovetail is probably the sort of glint of light that we can see, but again, that's an opportunity that's been presented to us probably, I don't know, 3 years ago. You're hoping it's coming soon, but that is probably the best opportunity we've got of a consolidation play, maybe.
And that first question about content, so those global US brands need, as a British company, UK-only company, they need to be able to join Barb and play to the same rules. And I think Google are trying a bit. Facebook, from what I understand, aren't really trying at all. And therefore, it becomes difficult to have that one standard currency, one way of measuring what you're actually buying. And I think if they don't play to those rules, I think a lot of advertisers will struggle to allow them to play in the UK advertising market. Although they're doing a pretty good job already, let's not kid about it.
Well, no one seems to mind that it's the 10th occasion of Facebook misrepresenting their numbers, but we might as well carry on.
We mind, but yeah. I think that is an oddity, and I'm one advertiser. I was met with about 15 of them this morning. We were talking about addressable TV. Yeah. The odd thing is there are a lot of advertisers who seem to turn a blind eye to the brand safety issues on YouTube and on Facebook and the measurement issues. Partly because it's difficult for media people, advertising people, go to marketing directors and CEOs and saying, do you know what, we don't think we should be on YouTube. Because they'll be at home with their families, spending more and more time on YouTube and thinking, why is my marketing director not recommending this? So there is a bit of human decision-making in that, which, well, I try and overcome with my powers.
Jamie could reflect on this as well. We look at it from our perspective in terms of the I suppose the rules that we adhere to as a broadcaster in terms of brand safety and Ofcom codes, and it's unfathomable for me that there isn't enough pressure being put on some of these digital giants, for want of a better word, to adhere to the same rules. So I think it's a bit nonsensical to me. But I suppose I sit in a very obviously, on one end of the spectrum, but why isn't it happening?
I think the other point, so I think the brand safe environment is really important, but I think also we need to think about the context of the numbers that we're talking about. So whether you look over in the UK over the last 15 or so years, average minutes viewed to TV has reduced marginally by something like 3.5 minutes. 3.5 minutes a day has been the decline. In the US, actually, it's even less. It was only 1 minute decline over the last 10 years. But what has changed is that pastimes have evolved. When I grew up, you were sent outside, particularly in the summer holidays, you were sent outside, you had a packed lunch, and you didn't have online devices, but you had other interests. But we still, centred back to the TV. But it's different pastimes and interests that are changing. Not everything is towards the death knell of TV. And I think we kind of get caught in this sort of vortex of, and a new phrase that I heard last week, goobuk, of selling that everything is moving onto those platforms. We need to just wake up and smell the coffee and reflect on household behaviours. I've got a 16-year-old and 14-year-old. Yes, they look at Facebook. Yes, they look at Snapchat. Yes, they look at YouTube. They quite often sit down with us and watch a movie, watch sport, a lot of sport, too much sport, not enough revision. That was last night. He's got maths GCSE tomorrow, so that's going to be a bit different. The world is evolving, and we just need to just accept that we are not, in the media and marketing industry, representative of Joe Bloggs on the street.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think the cracks are starting to appear. I mean, obviously, there's been countless articles and findings over the last few months where the giants are starting to be held accountable, right? And I think and Chris, let me know if you disagree here, but I think where advertisers have been very invested has been the fact that they've seen they can build reach incredibly quickly and very cost effectively on those platforms, but on their numbers. And this is where I think we have, this is an industry issue that we have to try and fix, is that, to your point, Jamie, the TV consumption isn't declining, it's just changing and fragmenting, right? And so, yes, okay, linear viewing, as if you look at Barb numbers month on month, yes, in certain demographics, those are down, but actually that's being compensated back by on-demand viewing. The problem is that on-demand viewing isn't accurately measured, or not even measured at all in some instances, right? So we've got to fix that, all right? And that's on sort of all of us really on this panel to sort of dig in and find a solution there, because if we wait around, it will be too long.
But I mean, the scope of the opportunity is if you've got addressable linear advertising, it will dwarf all these other things we're talking about, because people watch live TV mainly still, and they watch live TV in front of the main screen in the home, not on devices around the home. To Jamie's point, as much as people in this room may do that, if you go to Talk and you talk to them about their demographics, and we talk to them about the capabilities we can provide for Sky Q type functionality, and they'll say that most of their core customers just watch the TV in the living room.
It is interesting as well. I mean, I probably shouldn't be saying this, but there is a question mark as to why do we want to? What is the real purpose of addressable advertising when we've got Barb that supports TV buying audiences, that we can target audiences in a very, very effective, relatively efficient way. And what is the real nugget of gold that addressable TV, in inverted commas, is delivering? Yes, it's going to deliver really direct, potentially one-to-one or one-to-few targeting. One of the challenges, and I'm sure Jamie will report to this as well, is that when you start really offering really highly targeted advertising, it comes at a very, very high cost. So, we can offer some really great targeting on all four for specific audiences, specific interest groups, even specific, individuals based in certain, locations around. But, that cost per thousand might come to £150, £200 CPM. And, most advertisers are going, well, I'm not going to pay that. So then it comes back to the first principle as to, I think it's just an interesting debate.
And for a lot of advertisers, wastage is good. So, I think you all probably have current accounts, and I might think that gentleman there is more likely to switch than that lady over there. So I can target him, but actually I sort of want her to see it as well, because she might be the one who actually switches. So I think there is a risk that addressable TV explodes and we kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
I think that's one of the challenges or the comments that I hear an awful lot, which is, why on earth are you, if you like, denigrating TV's power? Why are you reducing it? And actually, I just look at it from a completely different lens. I still believe that the vast majority of advertisers that use TV today will still use it the same way in many, many years to come. But, when I remember having to present one of the business justifications to the board of Sky, and the argument was, very broadly, we target today, or we compete in a market that's at the time, £4.5 billion a year. Wouldn't it be nice to be competing for a market that's £12 billion a year, just in the UK? And just to take a small percentage of that, to make TV more relevant, to compete against direct mail. McLaren cars were spending something like £10 per household to deliver a brochure. They're not spending that to have a TV campaign. And it's, they've come back and booked their second and third campaigns. And that's taking money away from direct mail. We're taking money away from local press, local radio, search. And it's not about, people not using TV as they do today. It's just giving people more optionality and more choice. Audi have, I can't remember now, 7 or 8 models within the Audi mark. Ordinary, they would only advertise on TV, I think it was 3. But last year on Sky, they had 7 of them on air. And so, it just gives them more and more optionality. So actually, rather than, who was it, Tess or Lindsay at Thinkbox said, TV is not dying, it's having babies. And we're just creating more ways of using TV.
Fabulous. I like that phrase. I need to make a note of that quickly. Talking about quality, we've touched on it already a little bit, but I mean, there's different levels of quality of content. You've got user-generated content, social media content versus broadcast quality. Do you think this has a negative impact on the TV ad industry, and will consumers turn off rather than engage?
I think we're starting to see a bit of a kind of long tail of content into the TV business now, and it's interesting seeing Amazon's announcement in the last 24 hours of some of the channels that you can now bundle into your Prime subscription. You know, I think there's a question channel, for example, that you can bundle in for $4.99 a month, which
Also
clearly...
Country TV, it's on the Sky platform.
Oh, it is? I beg your pardon, Jamie.
Free on Sky.
I'll get back to you.
But it just goes to show that it fulfills a very particular niche, right, of people who are looking for a very specific kind of content. Now, I'm not to say that that's not quality content, but it is certainly not mass-produced broadcast content. It's for a very particular interest. And we asked that, you know, one thing that OTT or sort of streaming devices and content bundles is doing is starting to aggregate a lot of very specific and niche content that ordinarily might not exist. Granted, it might be on some of the channels on Sky, but I think even some of the stuff we're seeing in OTT is, you know, very unique and never seen before on television. So I think in that sense, content is very much changing. The quality of it, we can all debate, but it's certainly more niche. Yeah.
I don't think it's ever been as competitive, particularly in the sort of like in the TV sort of high end, even particularly sort of drama stakes. You know, you've got the big players now like Amazon and Netflix moving in and paying, you know, upwards of $1 million, $2 million an ep for episodes or series of like The Crown, for example. So, yeah, I think. But then you sort of like completely switch lanes, and then you look at what content is being delivered on the likes of YouTube and Facebook, and it's very, very different. And I think the challenge we have, I think, from a broadcast perspective, is just ensuring that advertisers recognise the difference between what you're buying when you're buying an impression or an ad on All 4 or Sky Go, for example, versus what you're buying on YouTube and Facebook. And I think that is not a nuance. That is a big difference. And I think it's fair to say that they've been that audio-visual buyers in some instances been pulled together. So we've done quite a lot of work over the last 12 to 18 months to kind of like just ensure that advertisers and agencies are aware of the big difference between the quality of inventory on broadcaster video platforms versus quality of inventory or viewing experience on the likes of YouTube and Facebook, and that's a big thing for us. Look, we're not saying those platforms don't have value. It's that if you're talking about, you know, trying to reach an engaged, attentive audience that's watching that content in full screen with the sound on and isn't doing this, what do they call it, thumb-stopping moment of 3 seconds, which ironically is the time it takes you to literally scroll your Facebook feed down your phone. It takes around 3 seconds, basically, is what we worked out, and that is counted as a view. Well, in our world, a 30-second ad viewed to 98% completion is what we count. So,
if YouTube was a British video platform, the issues that they faced recently with inappropriate content, I'm no legal expert, but I think the government or Ofcom would have shut them down immediately. And yet, because they are a global company, they seem to operate above the laws of each individual country that they operate in. And it doesn't seem right. And so we're not currently using YouTube, you'll be glad to know. And we haven't for some time, but they need to be policed in those individual countries. And I'm not sure what the solution is, because I don't think you can police global media players. Not because of their size and their wealth, it's just not possible.
So on the side of quality with regards to advertising, targeted advertising might encourage more brands to advertise on TV, and do you think that will see a decline in the quality of creatives, and is that already happening?
Well, Jamie says it isn't.
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on in the ad market. It used to be 10 years ago, you know, to create a TV ad, it cost you, you know, $100,000 plus. That's no longer the case. You know, some of the ads, whether it be animation or you know, or simple stock footage, you can create for, you know, $5,000 to $10,000, and we've got, you know, lots of advertisers doing it. You know, we you know, at Sky we have this kind of sort of challenging point to ourselves, which is, you know, you have to look at every piece. Firstly, every piece of creative is vetted. We've rejected a handful of ads It comes to something when I am the creative police, but it has happened a few times. But, we have to protect, right at the very heart and the core, our subscriber, our viewer experience. If we make it shit, they will not watch the platform or they will tune away. So we have to keep that really, really right at the heart and the centre of what we do. But to date, to the best of my knowledge, we have had not one complaint about any ad whatsoever. And I would challenge you to compare some of the regional ads critically versus some of the daytime ads in linear TV or indeed in some of the other environments. So I think Chris used the word sort of snobbery, and he's right. We can't be too snobbish about it, but I think we need to be we need to recognise it and be aware of it and just make sure that we're sensible in how we approach the market.
I think the creative agencies need to wake up to the new opportunities of addressable TV, and they need to come up, particularly the London-based ones, need to come up with solutions that make adverts as cheaply and quickly as possible. There's still, certainly some of the ones I've experienced over the years, still seem to be quite in a 1980s, 1990s model, quite a slow production process. And I mean, our current advertising format is quite easy to produce, and we have had a couple of random consumers making their own versions of our ads.
Did they change the APR?
One of them isn't that positive, but the production quality, whether that's his mate on the phone and a clever bit of graphics, but the production quality, certainly watching it on a phone, because it was on a social media feed, was, in my untrained eye, pretty high. I'm sure the creative director of our creative agency would have scoffed at his work, but that potential is there for user-generated advertising to be produced. And I don't think many brands and advertising agencies have grasped that opportunity to turn content around quickly and put on your platforms.
Recently, some of the agencies have started to change their model, and a couple of agencies in particular have created, it's quite difficult to describe now that I'm going into this, anyway, templated ads, but for different categories and sectors. So thinking about local markets, it might be accountancy firms or garden centres or vets practices, where they create a stock ad which has 5, I think, insertion points, and a completely different voiceover, and you can license that ad for a month and have it all reversioned for the sum total of £1,000. But they, that one ad that maybe cost them £7,000 so far in one particular category, they've made. Well, it's been 35 uses in different regions, and that's a really interesting model. It's quite a small creative agency, but they're now saying to us, right, give us 10 other categories, we'll invest the capital cost. So some businesses are evolving. Yes, there will be some that want the £100,000 plus creative cost, but
and the rest.
Yeah, I was trying to downplay it a little bit.
But to your point, Jamie, you're attracting new advertisers, and you're attracting people who are coming to TV, that are moving away from radio and classified and direct mail. And actually, on TV today, if you're watching daytime TV and you're seeing, injury at work adverts, they're not particularly high quality, and what you're replacing with is probably better than that. So I don't think that it's necessarily, pressing down on the quality of advertising.
I think there's also quite a bit that can be done with taking your beautiful brand ad that you have spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on it and just making it more relevant. One of the things that we're seeing quite a bit is take that hero ad and then either regionalise it, so change just the end frame of that ad, for example, to direct you to your nearest store or dealer or whatever it might be. So simple stuff where you're still retaining the quality and the experience and the sort of emotion of that ad, but you just purpose it for addressable quite simply, and that's a technology thing that can be quite simple, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is where we're at now. What do you think is the next step? Where will we be in 5 to 10 years' time?
Retired.
Out of this game.
Come on, Mr. Meg. Someone has to know what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, I'll go first, and they can all shoot me down. I think in 5 to 10 years, here's some predictions. I think Virgin, YouView, TalkTalk, all of the major platforms in the UK will have an addressable TV proposition. We'll all be doing the can down the street because we'll have consistent measurement currencies. And we'll be making it easy for broadcasters, agencies and advertisers to buy. I think that we will be in a world where you will be able to buy a single campaign across multiple platforms, frequency capped. Exactly what everyone wants. And it's something that we're working on. It's something that I'm pretty confident Channel 4 are working on. So, is that right? Yeah. Well, if you're not, you will be fine. No. So I actually think the future of TV has never been brighter. It is probably the most exciting period we've been in, and the acceleration of change is only getting greater and faster.
I think the percentage of revenues in TV that are addressable, you'll know better than me, is 3-4% possibly at the moment. I'm not sure it'll be more than, pick a number, 20%.
Fine.
But I think to your point earlier, the amount of revenue that will be going into television, the cake will be significantly bigger, because whether it's money out of direct mail or whether it's just new brands who didn't realise that television is doable because creative agencies have changed their model, or localised creative agencies can produce content quickly. So I think potentially a rosy future for television advertising.
I mean, I think Jamie's right, and I think the technology allows most of those things today. It's just working out how the transactional models work and how you simplify it. And I think technology will help, even overcoming some of those issues, such as household viewing versus individual viewing. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day about Wi-Fi proximity, where interrupting your Wi-Fi signals tells you how many people are in that particular room at that particular moment in time. There's Bluetooth beacons on smartphones. We all have our phone next to us when we're watching TV that can say how far are you away from the TV, which individuals are in the home at that time. And with data and data science, I think we have the capabilities of actually turning addressable advertising into something that is individual and is actually quite sophisticated. And I think if you can find a way of selling it in an easy way to the brands, I think there's always going to be a lot of brand advertising. I think the addressable number will be higher than 20%.
I think we need to remember or learn from the mistakes that the online industry has fallen into.
Oh God, yeah.
About
but the quality
brand safety,
the quality of the data
measurement.
that you have as first-party data sets, I think it's just so much stronger to be able to do better targeting, etc. in TV.
I don't think we can also underestimate the speed of consumer change as well. And if you'd have asked this question 5 years ago, don't think we'd have predicted that there would be a device that you can buy for 40 quid to get 4K streaming with voice search. And there will be more disruptive devices, I think, that will come in, and whether that's televisions, obviously there's speculation for years about Apple launching a television. Clearly, connected devices are just going to get better and better, faster and faster. Navigation is going to improve and continues to improve. The EPG, as we know it, has for a long time been sort of under threat in terms of how we navigate and find content. Clearly, there's going to be massive change and disruption there. But all of that, I think, hopefully, will create opportunity. And I think the one thing that will stay true is that people will always still want great content, and they'll still believe in great content. And just the way that we access it is going to change.
I think they'll still want those communal moments. So whoever pitched Gogglebox to Channel 4 must have initially thought, this is never going to work, they're never going to buy it. The programme is genius and is the greatest marketing tool for television ever invented, in my opinion. People still want to watch television together. They still want to watch Bake Off, Sherlock, and hear what everyone thinks about those programmes the next day. So I think, if it becomes addressable adverts and content that's being pre-selected by some clever algorithm rather than a scheduler, a human being, I think the magic of television starts to dissipate. I think we need to remember that.
Well, I think the elephant in the room for me is what we talked about earlier, which is Google and Facebook. And we can't ignore the trajectory of growth, particularly revenue growth in the last few years. I genuinely worry in not necessarily the next 10 years, but the next sort of 3 to 5 years, what business potentially we could have relative to those giants. And I look at the newspaper industry at the moment and some of the challenges that the print industry is facing off the back of maybe ignoring the wolf at the door, so to speak. And I suppose picking up on what Jamie was saying, I genuinely believe that there comes a point where working together will be beneficial. So aggregation at a macro level, be that around data, be that around content, discovery, both on digital or on a broader spectrum, be that in ad sales, I don't know, but I think you get to a point very, very quickly that you're much stronger together. And if we just carry on doing our own little thing, well, not necessarily little, but ploughing our own furrows, I think very, very quickly we could become subsumed. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the other thing that when you look back over the trade press and websites, etc., over the last few months, I think the other big sort of theme has been about transparency. And I think the risk of moving to a more automated world is that you move to a less transparent way of trading. And when we talk about, not going down the online world, one of the things that occurs to me is that we need to ensure that we protect the reputation of TV and we don't move into a non-transparent or indeed a transparently non-transparent arbitrage trading model. And I think that is something that is really top of mind for us when we think about how we trade and how we interact with brands directly or indeed with agencies, is that we apply the gold standard, the equivalent of Barb today, but in our trading model for tomorrow. We protect the content environment and the advertising environment within that, and then we make sure that we put the customer and the viewer right at the heart of everything we do. And if we do that, I kind of think we're going to stay broadly true to the main goal.
Fab. Well, thanks, guys. And I want to fire it to the audience now. Does anyone have any questions for our panel? Vicky, right to the front.
There's a question for Chris. What kind of success have you seen with addressable advertising, and how did you tailor your ads?
We haven't done any. I'm not quite sure why I'm up here.
It's because you're a bloody nice bloke.
I mean, partly I talked to it earlier. Our business is around. Thank you for that question. Making people save more money with Nationwide, having their current account with Nationwide. So it is virtually everyone in the UK. So we have target audiences, but ultimately we're building society that's there for everyone. That said, our model has changed. We want to have more dialogue with individual groups of customers. Our creative model has changed. We've made, I think it's 12 ads in the last 6 months versus maybe 2 in the previous 12 months. Therefore, we are talking to Sky and Channel 4 and the like to say, actually, now we've got content, we could serve this to more targeted audiences if the data that they have really provides insight, so that we know that those homes genuinely have maybe people who've just got their A-level results and we can serve them a message about our student product. That is really exciting for us. But we are still a mass UK brand whose products are largely available to everyone, so I think it's a small part of our armoury, but I don't think it's ever going to be a huge part for us as a big UK brand selling mass products.
I think one of the learnings that we sort of took in the early sort of time of AdSmart is that repeatedly brands, agencies would come back and say, prove the efficacy of the medium. You cannot just say it makes sense. So we've invested more money than I'd like to mention in building out an analytics suite and capability. So we have a product that supports AdSmart called, rather imaginatively, Sky AdSmart Analytics. But on the back of that, we can prove out the efficacy of any campaign that has data attached to it, whether that be transaction, interaction, or brand uplift studies and those sort of things. So if you go onto the website www.skymedia.co.uk/Sky AdSmart, there's about 50 case studies there from finance, from FMCG, from motoring to local to whatever, and testimonials and all of that sort of thing.
And the other point is, I talked about earlier, that we've got 50 million members, which is 1 in 4 in the UK. In theory, the ability to give that data to any of these media owners and cross-match sounds very exciting, but the FCA are not that enthusiastic about the way we might handle our data. And with GDPR coming down the line, the consumer might say, well, I didn't give you permission. So it's going to be harder, not easier, to be able to do the most exciting thing, which would be to match data. I think at the moment we're more reliant on the data that Sky or Channel 4 have to say, well, create an audience that you think is relevant for us, because I don't think that data matching is going to become any easier. It's going to become harder.
Next question.
Thank you. Colin Phillips of BT. So it's been a very good coverage about the UK marketplace. Addressable advertising was born in the US probably about 10 years ago, so now quite widely deployed also in Asia Pac as well. So I was wondering if the panel could say a little bit about the international situation, if there are any lessons we can learn from that in the UK, and when we might get some avail markers in linear content.
So I'll go first. I think there's a massive difference versus the way the US market operates versus the UK and Europe. The main thing is that in the US, the platforms, the cable and satellite platforms, are not vertically integrated in the channels. And so the way that addressable is working today in the main is that the 2 minutes an hour that are the cable or satellite opt-out minutes, those are the ones that are mainly used for addressability. And you're not seeing the likes of NBCU or Fox or whomever having full addressability in the core of their content. Where they are moving more towards, and Fox, Viacom and NBC have just launched a platform called OpenAP, is a form of addressability, which is data overlaid on national linear spots. So I think it's something that's talked a lot about in the US, but it's not really taken off. Rich might be able to talk about the Group M strategy, but also they have a division within Group M called Modi Media, which is a specialist marketing or media agency in the US, just helping brands get into addressability. In other territories, it's kind of light. So in Germany, HBB TVs, mainly so connected TVs, is the route to addressability. At Sky, we've launched AdSmart in this country shaped like a boot, Italy, got it. Earlier on this year, in Ireland, we've just launched in Test and Learn, and Germany, we've just started the project a little bit further behind. And so our ambition is to have consistent capabilities in every territory we operate. So I think it really does depend on the infrastructure or the setup of each market. You've got someone from Liberty Global in the room who can probably give you a much better overview than me.
I'll just add to what Jamie was saying. So, first of all, the US situation, totally agree. The reason we created Modi was that all of the cable companies are regional in nature. So for you to actually deliver a national addressable campaign in the US, you effectively have to stitch together multiple different regional cable operators into something that constitutes what looks like a national campaign. Each of those operators is using different data sets, different delivery methods, and it's very, very hard. So we created a specialist unit to manage that and actually try and simplify that and standardize that for our advertisers. And that is very unique to the US market. But where we see outside of the US, it really comes down to the dynamics of that TV marketplace. So it's basically, very broadly, markets that have high pay TV penetration. So, like the likes of Canada, US, UK, that have decent penetration of pay TV, where typically there is a relationship with a home and a set-top box in a home, and that means that some kind of ad insertion through a set-top box is probably going to be the way that you're going to do it. But then you'll have other markets where there is very low pay TV penetration rates, and typically they've kind of leapfrogged into things like IPTV, where you've got free-to-air broadcasting, but it's all just streamed over IP. You know, Singapore is an example of that. Starting to see Australia in certain places as well, where you're seeing actually, you know, a very different approach to the market, where it's about going straight into streamed delivery. And so by default, you're looking at something that looks more like OTT or IPTV streaming versus set-top box ad delivery. And the reality is, you know, you're not going to find a single way to do it globally. And unfortunately, if you're a global marketer and you're looking for a one-size-fits-all solution, it doesn't exist at the moment. And that's kind of one of the things that, you know, we're trying to solve at the moment is what constitutes addressable TV? How do we define standards that work across all these different delivery mechanisms and find something that can work on a multi-market basis?
Just on the topic of quality of data, so given how much information is now available through other platforms and on-demand services and such, how long do you think that Barb's kind of fairly restrictive database is going to be a high enough quality for advertisers? And do you think that it will stand the test of that 10 years that you've talked about?
So, firstly, I think it's important to put that in context. Barb is recognised globally as the leading TV panel. Secondly, and probably more importantly, you know, we're quite fortunate at Sky in that we have a number of different viewing panels. So if Barb is 5,100 households, we have a panel that we use that's capped and scaled, similarly to Barb, of 500,000 in size. But we also have an alternate day panel of, by the autumn, it'll be about 6 million. And the one thing that tells us is, broadly, you know, to a very, very, you know, sort of a small degree of accuracy, Barb is accurate. And so, you know, when you're looking to look at overall aggregated viewing at broad demographics across the country, Barb is spot on. It's not right, and which is why it's not, you know, relevant for AdSmart when you get down to, you know, we've got 1,228 different fixed attributes plus custom segments, where brands can bring their own data sets, match it with Sky's in a GDPR and data compliant way, including the banking industry, to ensure that they can target who they want when they want. It's not relevant for that, but I do think that Barb will continue to stay fit for the future in the long term. They're just about to award a new contract, and you'll see another big step change in capability. So, you know, I think we just need to recognise there are some constraints in what it can do, but as a planning and measurement tool for broad audiences and cross-platform consumption, when we have Dovetail in fully deployed, I think it's spot on, so it will be here.
And if the shareholders, some of them around the room, don't invest in Barb to allow them to keep up with that technology and keep that gold standard, then advertisers will have less confidence in TV as a medium and will move our money somewhere else. But at the moment, the online world doesn't really have that, so that's not ideal. The outdoor market have invested in Root. PAMCO is the publisher. Research was coming in 2018. So all these other media channels are investing. I think I'm pretty confident the broadcasters know that they do need to keep pace. And to be fair, you know, think about TV viewing 15 years ago to now. You know, Barb have kept up. There's been a few bumps in the road, but they're still doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, I think I would add that the standard, there's no debating the standard and the accuracy, where I think there will be challenges for future models for addressable, for example, is, you know, first of all, obviously it was created as a currency for broadcast TV and for largely sort of age, gender, broad segment based measurement. Clearly in the world of AdSmart, Channel 4 and any other solutions that may come after that, we're talking about fundamentally different data sets of which we're measuring delivery. And so Barb hasn't been set up to, you know, measure number of hairdressers in Kent or whatever it might be, right? It's a much more broad-based demographic solution. So I think what we'll start to need to consider is some of the data sets that we are using we need to figure out how we collaborate on those to define what it is that we deem to be a standard data set that we can all agree on and say, yeah, that constitutes something that we're okay with, that constitutes an audience, and that might be Virgin data, Sky data, Channel 4 data, agency data, client data, that assembles something that looks like a hybrid solution.
Stand up. One of the attractions for me of watching all four other platforms are available is that you see less adverts on there than you do when you're watching broadcast TV. When will that change?
Amy's going, really? It's not true. Thank you for that. That's my,
Colleague?
My colleague. I think that's a really interesting question, only in the context of, we have a different ad load, a restricted ad load relatively on all four versus, as Jamie sort of alluded to, the kind of like 9 minutes average that you see on linear TV. But the consumer behaviour is changing fundamentally, so we're seeing a huge reduction in viewing on browser-based platforms. Tablet-based viewing is actually flatlined, and where all the viewing is coming from actually is what we call televod. So big screen VOD on Samsung connected TVs, on Sky platform, or Virgin, etc. So I suppose there will come a point in the juncture where actually that advertising experience needs to really mirror the linear advertising experience. And if you're a Sky Q customer, you'll recognise that when you're effectively in a video on demand catch-up environment watching all four, and you effectively record, or you press you want to watch that content, or you stack that content, there's no discrimination between that content that you've stacked on VOD versus the content that you've stacked where you've just PVR'd. So yeah, I think it's a very good question. It's something that we wrestle with all the time. But conversely, we do get challenged all the time about both internally and externally about the relative ad load, because ultimately people don't like watching advertising.
Unless it's targeted and they love it.
But it's the trade-off, isn't it? It's the trade-off for being able to access great, fantastic content.
But by downloading that great, fantastic content from all four and other providers, you're more engaged, and it sounds like you, sir, are even more engaged because you think the ad breaks are going to be shorter. Therefore, for an advertiser, it pains me to say it, and I'm not going to say it to Jonathan, we might at some point be willing to pay a bit more because you're going to watch the ads. Not in my lifetime.
We should shake on that.
Yeah. It's been recorded, so I'm aware.
Ben James from Locati. I'd specifically like to ask Jonathan and Jamie about who will own the slot that is substituted in linear advertising. My previous discussions with Channel 4, it was always the distributor can't substitute that slot because Channel 4 have the demographics, and it's a beautiful demographics there that you have, but you wouldn't let anybody else substitute the slot. So if Simon's going to build a platform which substitutes the slot, will you let him use it?
So what you mean, the advertising slot that exists on a platform like YouView?
Yeah, or Virgin Media.
Who owns that substituted ad slot?
Yeah.
So the dynamically inserted slots.
Right.
Well, so we would take a view that the content that's being played on that particular platform is Channel 4's owned and operated content, and therefore the advertising that sits around it helps fund that content. So that's advertising that ultimately we would own and sell to a client or an agency.
So there is no point in Simon building the technology or Virgin building the technology to do the substitution?
No, that's wrong. I mean, we're providing a capability to Jonathan, to arguably target and make more money or more effectively, improve his yield on that ad space. So, there's a commercial model there somewhere around how we make money out of giving that capability to them. But it is definitely their inventory to decide whether to target or not.
Because it's slightly a virtuous circle, isn't it? If we're successful we create greater content, we create greater traction for these platforms, and ultimately enhance the success of those platforms further down the line. If we're disintermediated in that space, then there's less incentive for us to focus on those particular platforms where that's happening.
Yeah, it sounds like there is a business model that's yet to be worked out, actually, as to how that all works.
Yeah, I think that's fair. They being the broadcaster, whoever they may be, Sky, Channel 4, or ITV, or anyone, owns the right to place the advertising within their channel. A platform cannot, in the UK, override that right. However, if a platform can add value and generate incremental revenue, whether that be through premium or new advertising or new advertisers or whatever, I'm pretty confident that broadcasters and platforms will come to a commercial agreement that will recognise the value added. And the broadcaster will choose whether to retain sovereignty of sales, share sales capability, but that's their choice, not the platform's choice. But if we want to make money together and grow the cake together, then there's undoubtedly a commercial conversation to be had.
And I think it's an interesting question because there are emerging other addressable TV opportunities that exist outside of Sky and Smart, which I think you're probably referring to. So there's Samba TV, there's Sorensen Media, there's a number of different technology businesses that I think currently exist, mainly predominantly in the US, are moving over to the UK to offer these kind of solutions.
I think that we're out of time now, pretty much. So thank you to our great panellists that we've got. We've got Rich, Simon, Chris, Jonathan and Jamie.